There's a wild poetry in nature, raw, untamed, and breathtaking. But deep in the silence of forests and mountains lives a powerful force: the grizzly bear. Grizzly attacks aren't about malice, but when man and beast collide, they reveal nature's rules. These rare encounters remind us to tread with humility, respect, and awareness of the wild's true power. Locals had long learned to coexist with the wilderness surrounding them in the remote village of Verkhoyansky in eastern Siberia, nestled between the dense taiga forests and the looming mountains. It was 2017, and life in this isolated settlement remained largely unchanged by the modern world. Among the villagers was Elena Petrova Kuznetsova, a 42-year-old woman weighing approximately 500 pounds, who, despite her size, had developed remarkable knowledge of the forest's bounty. The region was known for its harsh winters and brief but abundant summers when the forest floor bloomed with mushrooms prized in markets across Russia. The villagers relied on these seasonal harvests to supplement their meager incomes, and Elena had established herself as one of the most knowledgeable foragers in the community. On September 14th, as the forest prepared for its autumn transformation, Elena set out at dawn. The crisp morning air carried the earthy scent of decomposing leaves and fungi. The weather forecast had predicted clear skies, ideal for mushroom hunting. Elena informed her neighbor Mikhail Stepanovich Volkov that she would be venturing deeper into the eastern section of the forest, where she believed the prized king bullets would be emerging. The area Elena had chosen was particularly rich in fungi due to its unique microclimate, but local hunters had recently reported increased bear activity there. The unusually warm autumn had delayed the bears' preparation for hibernation, making them more active and hungry than typical for mid-September. Elena moved slowly through the forest, her experienced eyes scanning the ground for the telltale caps of valuable mushrooms. By midday, her basket was half filled with an assortment of bullets, chanterelles, and honey fungus. She ventured farther into a densely wooded ravine where she had found exceptional specimens in previous years. Unbeknownst to Elena, a large male Ussuri brown bear, a subspecies of the grizzly weighing approximately 800 pounds, had established a feeding territory in this precise area. Wildlife biologists later determined that the bear had been unsuccessful in building adequate fat reserves for the coming winter, making it particularly aggressive about defending its food sources. As Elena descended into the ravine, she focused on the forest floor, unaware of the massive predator feeding on wild berries just 50 meters ahead. The direction of the wind that day proved unfortunate, blowing from Elena toward the bear and preventing her from detecting its scent. However, the bear caught Elena's scent almost immediately. According to wildlife behavior experts who later reconstructed the incident, the bear cautiously watched Elena behind a thicket of young pine trees. Only when she unwittingly approached within 30 meters did the bear perceive her as threatening its feeding ground. Elena's first indication of danger came when she heard branches cracking. Looking up, she faced the massive bear, which had risen to its full height. Wildlife authorities estimated the bear stood nearly 3 meters tall in this posture. Elena, experienced in forest safety, knew that running would trigger the bear's predatory instinct. Instead, she attempted to back away slowly while raising her arms to appear larger. Her strategy might have worked had it not been for a protruding tree root that caught her foot. Elena lost her balance, falling backward onto the forest floor. This sudden movement triggered the bear's attack response. It charged forward, covering the distance between them in seconds. Elena's considerable weight made it impossible to regain her footing quickly enough. The bear's first strike knocked her to the ground, its powerful claws tearing through her heavy autumn clothing and into her shoulder. Experts believe Elena likely lost consciousness within moments of the initial attack due to the severity of the trauma. Mikhail Volkov, who had decided to gather firewood in the same general forest area, heard Elena's initial cries for help. He later reported to authorities that the sounds had been brief but terrifying. The attack had ended when he reached the ravine, following the disturbed vegetation and blood trail. The bear had retreated deeper into the forest, possibly startled by Mikhail's approach. What Mikhail discovered was the severely mauled body of Elena. According to his statement to local authorities, her injuries were catastrophic, with extensive damage to her torso and neck. Despite his immediate efforts to administer first aid, Elena succumbed to her injuries before help could arrive. The Regional Wildlife Service organized a tracking party the following day, eventually locating the bear approximately 3 kilometers from the attack site. Based on its behavior and proximity to human settlements, wildlife officials made the difficult decision to euthanize the animal. Examination revealed the bear was undernourished and likely foraging more aggressively and closer to human settlements than normal. Following the tragedy, the village council of Verkhoyanski implemented new safety protocols for foragers. These included mandatory buddy systems, bear bells, and restrictions on how deep into known bear territories villagers could venture during late summer and autumn. Elena's family later established a small memorial at the forest's edge, where she had spent many hours pursuing her passion. The wooden marker, carved by her brother, serves as a remembrance and a somber reminder of the untamed nature of the wilderness they call home. Wildlife biologists use the incident to advocate for improved education about bear behavior in rural communities. They pointed out that such fatal encounters remain exceedingly rare, with this being only the second recorded fatal attack in the region's history over the past 30 years. The following spring, the village held a community gathering to share updated safety information provided by wildlife experts. They emphasized that while the forest held dangers, proper precautions could significantly reduce risks. Elena's extensive knowledge of mushroom foraging was compiled into a small guidebook, ensuring that her expertise would benefit future generations of villagers venturing into the forests of eastern Siberia. The rugged terrain of the national park northwest of Denver in north-central Colorado brought perfect camping conditions with mild temperatures and clear night skies in the summer of 2008. Troop 437 from Boulder, Colorado, had planned their annual wilderness excursion months, eager to test their outdoor skills in one of America's most spectacular landscapes. Among them was Scoutmaster Jefferson Jeff Montgomery Hawthorne, a 42-year-old former park ranger with extensive wilderness experience who had led the troop for over 7 years. The area selected for their campsite was in the park's western region, known for its diverse wildlife and stunning alpine scenery. Historical records showed that indigenous Ute tribes had used this area as seasonal hunting grounds for centuries before it was designated as federal parkland in 1915. Rangers had reported increased bear activity that summer due to a poor berry harvest at higher elevations, forcing bears to expand their foraging range. On the evening of July 17th, after hiking and wilderness skills training, the 12 scouts, aged 12 to 16, gathered around their carefully constructed campfire. They had followed proper protocols, storing all food items in bear-resistant containers 100 yards from their tents. The lingering scents of their earlier meal, foil-wrapped campfire potatoes and grilled sausages, still hung faintly in the air despite their precautions. As twilight deepened into night, the scouts were engaged in telling ghost stories, their voices occasionally rising with excitement or dropping to dramatic whispers. None noticed the dark shape moving silently through the trees downwind of their campsite. Wildlife biologists would later determine that the black bear, a male approximately 6 years old weighing around 250 pounds, had likely been drawn by the combination of food smells and human voices. Scout Elliot Prescott Zimmerman was the first to notice something was wrong when he observed Scoutmaster Hawthorne suddenly tense up, his attention fixed on a point beyond the fire's illumination. Following his gaze, Elliot spotted the bear approximately 30 yards away, moving cautiously toward their circle. Later interviews with the scouts revealed that time seemed to freeze as they processed the unexpected intrusion. Scoutmaster Hawthorne immediately recalled his wilderness training. He quietly but firmly instructed the boys to remain still while he slowly stood up. According to multiple accounts from the scouts, Hawthorne then employed standard bear deterrence techniques. He appeared larger by raising his arms while speaking loudly and authoritatively. He directed his commands toward the bear, telling it to leave and that it wasn't welcome. Initially, the bear paused, seemingly evaluating the situation. Park wildlife specialists later theorized that this particular bear had possibly had previous human encounters that resulted in food rewards, diminishing its natural wariness. What happened next occurred with frightening speed. Rather than retreating as expected, the bear suddenly charged. Wildlife behavior experts note that black bears rarely make false charges, unlike grizzlies, meaning they intend to make contact when they advance. Hawthorne had only seconds to react. He shouted for the boys to move behind him and toward the nearby clearing where their vehicles were parked. The bear reached Hawthorne before he could fully prepare his defense. The impact knocked him backward over the log he had been sitting on. The scouts later reported watching in horror as the bear swiped at their scoutmaster, its claws tearing through his heavy jacket and into his left shoulder. Despite being knocked down, Hawthorne fought back aggressively, punching the bear's sensitive nose area and shouting continuously. Assistant Scoutmaster Preston Caldwell Thatcher, returning from checking the perimeter, heard the commotion and rushed to assist. He grabbed a burning branch from the fire and charged toward the bear, waving the flaming stick and yelling. The combination of the fire, additional human presence, and Hawthorne's resistance convinced the bear that the potential meal wasn't worth the effort. It retreated into the darkness, disappearing among the trees as quickly as it had appeared. The entire attack lasted less than 30 seconds, but left Hawthorne with deep lacerations across his shoulder and upper arm, along with puncture wounds from the bear's teeth when it had attempted to bite his forearm. 14-year-old scout Vincent Alexander Mackenzie, who had recently completed advanced first aid training, helped Thatcher apply pressure bandages to control the bleeding. In contrast, two older scouts ran to their vehicles to drive to the nearest ranger station for help. Park rangers arrived within 40 minutes, accompanied by emergency medical technicians who stabilized Hawthorne before transporting him via ambulance to a hospital in Granby. Surgeons there performed a 3-hour operation to repair muscle damage and prevent infection. Although Hawthorne's injuries were serious, doctors reported that no major arteries had been severed, and he was expected to make a full recovery with physical therapy. Following the attack, park rangers set traps and captured a male black bear matching the scout's description. DNA testing of hair and saliva samples from Hawthorne's clothing confirmed it was the same animal involved in the attack. Due to the bear's aggressive behavior toward humans, park officials made the difficult decision to euthanize it, according to established wildlife management protocols. The incident prompted Colorado Parks and Wildlife to revise its educational materials for campers, emphasizing that even experienced outdoors people could encounter dangerous wildlife. The Boy Scouts of America also updated their wilderness training programs, incorporating lessons from Troop 437's experience. 6 months after the attack, Scoutmaster Hawthorne returned to his leadership role with the troop with limited mobility in his left arm. He used his experience to create a specialized wildlife safety course that became mandatory for regional scouts. The troop also designed a special merit badge focused on wildlife encounter preparedness that was eventually adopted by scout troops nationwide. When interviewed for the park's safety campaign the following year, Hawthorne emphasized that the incident had reinforced rather than diminished his respect for wildlife. He stressed that humans were visitors in the bear's territory and that proper preparation and awareness were essential when venturing into wilderness areas. The scout troop's experience became a powerful teaching tool, highlighting the importance of wildlife awareness while enjoying America's natural treasures. The remote waterways of a national park in the Alaska Peninsula, across from Kodiak Island, have long drawn adventurers seeking pristine wilderness experiences. In 1996, these waters became the setting for a harrowing encounter between experienced kayaker Julia Renata Kowalczyk and one of the region's massive coastal brown bears. The Kvichak River system, with its legendary salmon runs, had attracted human visitors for millennia. From indigenous populations to modern fishing enthusiasts and outdoor adventurers. Julia, a 34-year-old marine biologist from Seattle, had been planning her solo kayaking expedition for months. With over 15 years of wilderness experience and multiple Alaska trips, she carefully mapped a route to take her through some of the park's most scenic areas. She had obtained all necessary permits and attended the mandatory safety briefing at the ranger station, where staff had emphasized the importance of remaining vigilant in bear country. On the morning of June 22nd, as the Alaskan summer sun shimmered on the water by 5:30 a.m., Julia launched her kayak into the swift-flowing river. The day promised perfect conditions, with clear skies and temperatures expected to reach the mid-60s. Park records later show salmon ran strongly that season, drawing higher than usual bears to the riverbanks. Having paddled approximately 8 miles downriver, Julia approached a local sharp bend called Eagle's Turn. The high banks and dense vegetation made seeing what lay around the corner impossible. Following standard river paddling protocol, she stayed outside the bend where the current was slower, allowing better control. As her kayak rounded the bend, Julia was less than 20 yards from a large female grizzly bear with distinctive blonde-tipped fur. The bear, later estimated by wildlife biologists to weigh approximately 700 pounds, was focused on catching salmon in the shallows. Julia immediately recognized the danger of her situation. She later reported attempting to back-paddle quietly while keeping her eyes on the bear, hoping to retreat without drawing attention. Unfortunately, the sound of her paddle or perhaps her movement caught the bear's attention. According to the reconstruction of events by park rangers, the bear initially raised its head, nostrils flaring as it processed this unexpected intrusion. Remembering her training, Julia made her presence known by speaking calmly but firmly, identifying herself as human rather than prey. For several tense moments, the bear watched her, seemingly assessing the situation. Julia maintained eye contact while maneuvering her kayak backward against the current. Park wildlife specialists believe what happened next was likely triggered by the bear's protective instinct rather than predatory behavior, as a subsequent investigation revealed 2 cubs partially hidden in the brush behind the mother bear. The bear charged into the water with startling speed toward Julia's kayak. The current, which had been working against her escape attempt, betrayed her further by pushing her craft closer to the charging bear. The initial impact capsized the kayak, throwing Julia into the frigid water. Julia later described feeling the bear's claws rake across her leg as she struggled to right herself in the swift current. Standing in chest-deep water, the bear continued attacking, clamping its jaws around Julia's right thigh. In what wildlife experts later described as an extraordinarily well-executed defensive maneuver, Julia struck at the bear's sensitive nose and eyes with her carbon fiber paddle, which she had somehow retained during the capsizing. The sharp blow caused the bear to release its grip momentarily. Julia took advantage of this brief reprieve to push herself away with the paddle, allowing the current to carry her downstream while keeping the paddle between herself and the bear. The mother bear, perhaps satisfied that the threat to her cubs was retreating, did not pursue further, instead returning to the shoreline where she could monitor her offspring. Drifting downriver, bleeding profusely from deep puncture wounds in her thigh, Julia managed to grab onto an overhanging branch and pull herself toward the opposite shore. Conservation Officer Thornton Wesley McClintock, who had been fly fishing approximately a quarter-mile downstream, witnessed the latter part of the incident and rushed to her aid. Using his satellite phone, McClintock called for emergency assistance while applying a tourniquet to Julia's leg using his belt and clothing from his fishing vest. A Park Service helicopter, already in the air conducting routine wildlife surveys, was diverted to their location and arrived within 40 minutes. The medical team stabilized Julia before transporting her to a regional hospital, where surgeons worked for 5 hours to repair extensive muscle and vascular damage to her right leg. Despite the severity of her injuries, Julia was fortunate. The bear's teeth had missed her femoral artery by millimeters. After 3 weeks in the hospital and 6 months of intensive physical therapy, she regained approximately 85% of function in her injured leg. The attack left her with significant scarring and recurring pain during cold weather, but doctors considered her recovery remarkable given the circumstances. Following the incident, the national park implemented enhanced safety protocols for river users, including mandatory bear spray carrying for all kayakers and canoeists. During salmon runs, they also established new restrictions on solo travel in high-concentration bear areas. The specific bend where the attack occurred was designated a no-stopping zone for watercraft, with signs posted at appropriate intervals upstream warning of the potential danger. When interviewed for a documentary the following year, Julia expressed no anger toward the bear, acknowledging that she had entered its territory during a vulnerable time with cubs present. She used her platform as a scientist to advocate for greater understanding of bear behavior and improved wilderness education. Her detailed attack account became standard reading in Alaska wilderness safety courses. Park authorities monitored the mother bear and her cubs, but left them undisturbed. They determined that the animal had acted naturally to protect her young, rather than displaying unusual aggression toward humans. The family group was frequently sighted along that stretch of river for the next 3 seasons. Still, no further incidents were reported, reinforcing wildlife experts' assessment that the attack had been defensive rather than predatory. By 2011, the lush forests surrounding Whistler, British Columbia, had been transformed into a mountain biking mecca, with hundreds of kilometers of trails catering to riders of all abilities. The region's unique combination of stunning natural beauty and challenging terrain attracted outdoor enthusiasts worldwide, including 29-year-old professional mountain biker Rachel Avalon Thistlewood from Melbourne, Australia. What began as a routine training ride on May 15th would become a life-altering encounter that changed regional wildlife management practices. The trail network in the Fitzsimmons Range had been developed over decades, initially by logging companies and later expanded by dedicated mountain biking enthusiasts. Environmental impact studies had documented the area's significant black bear population, which had grown accustomed to human presence, but generally avoided direct interaction. Seasonal variations in food availability occasionally brought bears closer to human-used areas, particularly during late spring when natural food sources were limited. Rachel had arrived in Whistler 3 weeks earlier to train for the upcoming North American Enduro Series. An accomplished rider with numerous podium finishes in international competitions, she had been carefully studying the local trails, particularly the challenging section known as Devil's Backbone that descended through old-growth forest before connecting to the main valley trail system. The morning weather had proven perfect for riding, cool but not cold, with high clouds providing ideal visibility without direct sunlight glare through the forest canopy. Rachel had set out at 7:30 a.m., preferring to train before the recreational riders crowded the trails. She had completed her warm-up and was running down Devil's Backbone. Her GPS data later showed that she traveled approximately 32 kilometers per hour on the technical descent. Approaching a blind corner with a bank turn, Rachel focused on her line through the upcoming technical section. Trail camera footage installed by the biking club for training purposes later revealed that a medium-sized black bear had wandered onto the trail less than 30 seconds before Rachel's arrival. Wildlife experts estimated the bear to be a 3-year-old male weighing approximately 180 pounds, likely recently separated from its mother and establishing its territory. Neither Rachel nor the bear had any warning of the impending encounter. As Rachel rounded the corner, her front wheel was less than 5 meters from the bear. Both were startled by the sudden confrontation. Rachel instinctively applied her brakes and attempted to swerve, but the steep gradient and loose surface caused her tires to lose traction. Her bike slid sideways, throwing her directly toward the startled animal. The bear, displaying a typical defensive reaction, swatted at the perceived threat. Its powerful paw caught Rachel's shoulder and upper arm as she attempted to protect her face, the impact spinning her around and throwing her against a trailside tree. The bear then bit down on her left calf before releasing it and backing away, apparently confused by the unfamiliar situation. Though severely injured, Rachel maintained enough presence of mind to remember her wildlife safety training. She remained motionless, playing dead while breathing shallowly. The bear circled her twice, sniffing cautiously before retreating about 10 meters up the hillside, where it continued to observe the strange human who had suddenly appeared in its path. Xavier Prentice Thornhill, another early morning rider approximately 2 minutes behind Rachel on the trail, rounded the same corner moments later. Seeing Rachel on the ground and the bear nearby, he immediately began making noise, shouting and banging his aluminum water bottle against his handlebars. The bear, already stressed from the initial encounter and now facing a second human, retreated further into the forest. Once the bear had moved away, Xavier approached Rachel and assessed her injuries. The bear's claws had left deep lacerations across her shoulder and upper arm, while the bite to her calf had punctured through muscle, but thankfully missed major blood vessels. Using the first aid kit from his hydration pack, Xavier applied pressure bandages to control the bleeding while calling emergency services on his cell phone. The Whistler Mountain Bike Patrol, known for their rapid response, arrived within 12 minutes, followed shortly by paramedics. Rachel remained conscious throughout the rescue operation, later recalling that her primary emotion had been disbelief rather than fear. She was transported to a healthcare center for initial treatment before being transferred to a general hospital for specialized care. Surgeons spent over 4 hours cleaning and repairing Rachel's wounds, particularly concerned about potential infection from the bear's oral bacteria. She received rabies prophylaxis and powerful antibiotics as a precautionary measure. Although the physical damage was extensive, no major nerves had been severed, and doctors predicted she would eventually regain full function of her injured limbs with proper rehabilitation. Conservation officers located and tranquilized the bear the following day. After a thorough evaluation, wildlife biologists determined the animal had no history of human encounters and had simply reacted defensively to a sudden threat. Rather than euthanizing the bear, authorities relocated it to a remote area approximately 100 kilometers north of Whistler, fitting it with a tracking collar to monitor its future movements. The incident prompted the Whistler Off-Road Cycling Association to implement new safety protocols for areas with high bear activity. These included seasonal trail closures during peak bear foraging periods, improved signage warning of recent wildlife sightings, and the installation of bear bells at trailheads for riders to attach to their bikes. The local mountain biking community also established an online alert system where riders could report wildlife sightings in real time. 6 months after the attack, Rachel returned to competitive riding, though she chose to focus on events in her native Australia for the following season. She became an advocate for wildlife awareness in recreational areas, developing a popular workshop for mountain bikers on coexisting with large predators. The scars on her shoulder and calf became visual reminders of the importance of remaining alert in wild places, a message she shared whenever asked about her experience. The trail section where the encounter occurred was redesigned to include wider sight lines at corners and became a case study in wildlife-conscious trail building. British Columbia parks used the incident in their educational materials, emphasizing that wild animals remain unpredictable and deserving of caution and respect, even in areas with frequent human use. The vast wilderness of a national park in the central area of the Alaska Range has drawn nature enthusiasts and adventure seekers since its establishment in 1917. In 2004, the park's 6 million acres of pristine Alaskan terrain became the backdrop for a tragic encounter between wildlife and visitors that would reshape the park's approach to visitor management. The incident involved a tour group of 7 visitors from various states who had booked an extended backcountry experience through Mountain Vistas Expeditions, a well-regarded outfitter with over 20 years of operation in the region. The national park's unique ecosystem represented one of North America's most complete and undisturbed natural areas, home to grizzly bears, wolves, moose, caribou, and numerous other species. Park records indicated that while bear sightings were common, attacks remained extremely rare, with only 3 recorded injuries from bears in the previous decade. The Park Service had developed comprehensive safety protocols, requiring all visitors venturing beyond developed areas to attend safety briefings and follow strict guidelines regarding food storage and wildlife encounters. On August 29th, under clear autumn skies with temperatures in the mid-50s, the touring party had been hiking through the alpine tundra of the Toklet River Basin. The group included John Wellington Abernathy, a 47-year-old investment banker from Chicago, Priscilla Ewan Lee Thompson and her husband Marcus Thompson from Seattle, elderly couple Gertrude and Wilbur Himmelstein from Florida, and sisters Francesca and Bianca Capriotti from New York. Their guide, experienced naturalist Zachariah Quincy Pendergast, had led over 200 similar expeditions. According to Pendergast's later statement to park authorities, the group had stopped for lunch at an elevated viewpoint, allowing panoramic vistas of the nearby mountain range. Unknown to them, a female grizzly with 2 cubs had been feeding on berries in a nearby ravine, concealed by dense willow thickets. Rangers would later determine that the bear was approximately 8 years old and had no documented history of human encounters, though wildlife monitoring cameras had photographed her throughout the summer. While the group repacked their gear after lunch, John Abernathy reportedly noticed movement in the brush below their position. Excited at the potential for spotting wildlife, he moved away from the group toward the edge of the overlook for a better view despite Pendergast's cautionary call to maintain group cohesion. What happened next unfolded with frightening speed. The mother bear, likely startled by Abernathy's sudden appearance above her, responded with explosive defensive aggression. Wildlife biologists later explained that the presence of cubs would have heightened her protective instincts, and the group's position, inadvertently between the mother and her young, created a worst-case scenario for a bear encounter. Multiple witnesses said the bear charged up the slope, covering approximately 40 yards in seconds. Pendergast shouted for everyone to group while retrieving bear spray from his belt holster. Abernathy, however, had moved too far from the others. In what witnesses described as panic, he attempted to retreat, but tripped over exposed tree roots, falling directly in the bear's path. The grizzly reached Abernathy before he could regain his footing. The initial impact knocked him several feet backward. The bear then delivered several powerful bites to his midsection and throat before Pendergast could deploy the bear spray. When the irritant cloud reached the bear, it immediately retreated, dragging Abernathy approximately 15 feet down the slope before releasing him and returning to her cubs. Certified in wilderness first aid, Pendergast rushed to Abernathy's side while instructing the others to maintain vigilance. His examination revealed catastrophic injuries, including massive trauma to the neck and abdomen. Despite the immediate application of pressure bandages from the group's emergency kit, Abernathy's injuries proved fatal within minutes. Pendergast used his satellite phone to alert park emergency services, with the bear still visible in the brush below. He then organized the remaining tourists into a tight group and began a careful retreat along their incoming trail, maintaining constant noise and vigilance. Park rangers intercepted the group approximately 2 miles from the incident site, escorting them to safety while a separate team approached the attack location. A Park Service helicopter arrived at the scene within 40 minutes. Medical personnel confirmed Abernathy's death, while wildlife specialists tracked the bear and her cubs, maintaining visual contact from a safe distance. After extensive consultation between park management, wildlife biologists, and regional officials, authorities decided against euthanizing the bear, determining she had displayed natural defensive behavior rather than predatory aggression. The remaining tour group members were transported to park headquarters, receiving counseling support and assistance with arrangements to return home. In subsequent interviews with investigators, all praised Pendergast's quick thinking and professional handling of the crisis, noting that his actions likely prevented additional casualties. The tragedy prompted a comprehensive review of the national park's backcountry protocols. The Park Service implemented enhanced bear awareness training for all guides and visitors, established more detailed mapping of seasonal bear activity zones, and developed stricter guidelines for group cohesion in wilderness areas. The attack location was temporarily closed to hiking, with rangers monitoring bear movement patterns before eventually reopening it with additional warning signage and mandatory check-in procedures. Mountain Vista's expeditions cooperated fully with the investigation, temporarily suspending operations while reviewing their safety procedures. When they resumed guiding 6 weeks later, they had implemented additional precautions, including carrying multiple canisters of bear spray per group and enhancing their pre-trip wildlife safety education. Abernathy's family established a memorial foundation funding wildlife conservation and safety education. Their public statements emphasized that they did not blame the bear, the Park Service, or the tour operator, recognizing that wilderness areas inherently involve risk that can never be eliminated. The incident became a nationwide case study in park management courses, highlighting the delicate balance between providing access to wild places and ensuring visitor safety. The national park continued its commitment to maintaining natural wildlife behavior patterns while developing increasingly sophisticated methods of minimizing dangerous human-wildlife encounters, ensuring that the tragedy would lead to safer experiences for future visitors to America's wilderness areas. The remote shores of Afognak Island, part of the Kodiak Archipelago off Alaska's southern coast, have long attracted adventurous souls seeking true wilderness experiences. In 2019, this pristine landscape became the setting for an extraordinary survival story when experienced outdoorsman Thomas Bartholomew Faulkner was in a life-or-death struggle with North America's largest land predator. The densely forested island, separated from Kodiak by a narrow strait, had been used for subsistence hunting by indigenous Alutiiq people for thousands of years before becoming part of the state's managed wilderness areas. Faulkner, a 36-year-old wilderness guide from Montana with extensive backcountry experience across North America, had been planning his solo photography expedition to document Afognak's coastal brown bears for months. Having obtained the necessary permits and registered his itinerary with local authorities, he established his base camp in a small clearing approximately half a mile from Seal Bay on the island's eastern shore. The location offered panoramic views while maintaining a minimum distance from known bear trails and feeding areas. On the night of September 3rd, after 10 days of successful wildlife observation and photography, Faulkner retired to his reinforced mountaineering tent shortly after sunset. According to his later account to wildlife officials, he had followed strict bear safety protocols, cooking his meal several hundred yards from his sleeping area and storing all food and scented items in a bear-resistant container suspended between trees approximately 100 yards downwind from his camp. The night's weather turned unexpectedly, with temperatures dropping and a light rain beginning around midnight. Wildlife biologists later theorized that these conditions may have affected the bear's behavior and movement patterns. The animal involved was subsequently identified through DNA analysis as a mature male Kodiak bear, estimated to weigh approximately 1,100 pounds, one of the largest documented in the region that year. Faulkner reported being jolted awake at approximately 2:17 a.m. by what he initially thought was a falling branch striking his tent. The reality proved far more terrifying, as massive claws ripped through the reinforced nylon, creating a 3-foot gash in the tent wall. As standard procedure, Faulkner had placed his hunting knife and bear spray within arm's reach. But he had only seconds to react as the enormous bear thrust its head through the opening. In the confusing darkness, illuminated only by Faulkner's headlamp, which he had activated upon waking, the bear clamped its jaws around his right forearm. Faulkner, displaying remarkable composure under extreme duress, managed to grasp his knife with his left hand and strike at the bear's face, reportedly making contact with its eye or eye socket. The bear immediately released its grip and backed partially out of the tent, giving Faulkner precious moments to retrieve his bear spray. As the bear attempted to re-enter through the torn fabric, Faulkner discharged the spray directly into its face from a distance of less than 3 feet. The powerful capsaicin cloud had an immediate effect, causing the bear to retreat while vocalizing loudly. Not trusting the deterrent to keep the animal away, Faulkner quickly pulled on his boots, grabbed his satellite phone and emergency kit, and evacuated the damaged tent. With blood streaming from multiple puncture wounds in his arm, Faulkner made his way to his kayak, which he had secured above the high tide line. Using it as both transportation and barrier, he pushed off from shore and paddled approximately half a mile across Seal Bay to a small islet. From this relatively secure position, he activated his emergency locator beacon and used his satellite phone to call the Alaskan authorities' emergency line. Due to the remote location and nighttime conditions, rescue personnel could not reach Faulkner until daybreak. He applied pressure bandages from his first aid kit throughout the night and communicated with emergency services via satellite phone. By first light, he had developed symptoms of shock from blood loss and exposure, but remained conscious and coherent. A Coast Guard helicopter from Kodiak Station located Faulkner at 6:42 a.m., approximately 4.5 hours after the attack. Medical personnel winched down to his position, stabilized his injuries, and evacuated him to a community hospital. He was later transferred to a medical center in Anchorage, where surgeons repaired extensive muscle damage and addressed multiple fractures to his radius and ulna. Wildlife authorities investigated the attack site the following day, finding Faulkner's tent destroyed and signs of the bear's return after his escape. Their examination revealed that all food storage protocols had been properly followed. DNA samples collected from blood on Faulkner's knife and saliva on his damaged clothing allowed them to identify the specific bear from the regional DNA database of previously tagged animals. The bear, designated KB237 in research records, had been captured and collared 3 years earlier during population studies. Its tracking data showed no previous close approaches to human camps, leading biologists to categorize the incident as an anomalous event rather than predatory behavior. After extensive deliberation, officials decided against attempting to locate and euthanize the animal, as evidence suggested the negative experience had sufficiently deterred it. Faulkner spent 2 weeks in the hospital, followed by 3 months of intensive physical therapy. He regained approximately 80% of function in his injured arm. He returned to wilderness guiding the following year, though he admitted to colleagues that he now slept with greater anxiety when in bear country. His satellite phone provider featured his story in safety advertisements, crediting the technology with saving his life by enabling prompt rescue in an extremely remote location. The incident prompted the Alaska Department of Fish and Game to revise its guidance for backcountry camping on Afognak and similar islands with dense Kodiak bear populations. New recommendations included using portable electric fences around sleeping areas and enhanced protocols for solo travelers. Faulkner became an advocate for wilderness safety, developing a popular lecture series that used his experience to illustrate proper preparation and the unpredictable nature of wildlife encounters. During his recovery, Faulkner wrote an account of his experience, which was published in a magazine. The article emphasized that despite his trauma, He maintained deep respect for these powerful animals and recognized that he had been visiting their territory. He concluded with his observation that true wilderness experiences always carry inherent risks. However, even the most dangerous situations can be survived with proper preparation and equipment.